He said her name like a man who had spent 4 years learning not to say it. One word, barely a sound. And the woman standing across the lobby with a small boy holding both her hands turned slowly, the way people turn when they already know what they are going to see, and she looked at him. The boy looked up too, and Nathan Hale, billionaire, owner of the building they were all standing inside, felt something happen in his chest that he had no name for. Well, because the name for it had been buried 4 years ago at a memorial service for a child he was now looking at, alive, holding a toy car in his left hand, wearing a striped long-sleeved shirt, standing 12 feet away like he had every right to be there, which Nathan was beginning to understand he did. His fiancée was beside him. She had gone very still. She was looking at Nathan's face, not at the boy. Because Nathan's face was doing something she had never seen it do in 14 months of being the woman he had chosen to build a future with. And the question that lived in that stillness, the question Nathan had no answer for yet, was this. Who else knew? Who else had stood close enough to him to know and said nothing? Welcome to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis. I am so glad you are here today. Tell me where you are listening from. Drop it in the comments because I read every single one. Stay with me all the way to the end of this story. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now, because every story on this channel is about what people do when they believe no one is watching. This one is no different. Nathan Hale's mornings were engineered, not in the way that anxious people engineer their mornings, stacking alarms and rehearsing conversations in the bathroom mirror. Nathan's mornings were engineered the way a building is engineered, load-bearing, precise, every element in its calculated place, because Nathan Hale had learned 4 years ago what happened when you stop paying attention for even a moment. You came home to find the world had rearranged itself without you. He had made sure since then that there was no moment he was not paying attention. The car arrived at 8:47, not 8:45, not 8:50. The driver, Gerald Chen, had been early exactly once in 3 years, and Nathan had thanked him politely and asked him, with the specific courtesy of a man who does not raise his voice because he has never needed to, not to do it again. Gerald Chen had not done it again. Nathan was in the back seat reading the board meeting agenda on his tablet. He read it the way he read everything, completely, each line registered and filed. Nothing skimmed, because skimming was a habit for people who could afford to be wrong. Nathan Hale had not afforded himself that in a long time. Renata Shaw was beside him, reviewing her own documents on her phone. She was a junior partner at the firm that handled Hale Capital's litigation, and she was the kind of woman who was described universally as impressive. Not beautiful first, impressive first. She had never minded that. She reached across without looking up from her screen and straightened Nathan's tie. A half-inch adjustment, barely anything. He let her. This was the texture of what they had, functional and warm, one organized in the way that people organize affection when they have decided that affection should be reliable rather than consuming. Nathan had decided that 4 years ago. Renata had accepted it. They were good at it. He checked his watch. 8:43. He looked out the window at the city moving past, gray and bright at the same time, the specific quality of an autumn morning that has not yet decided what it is going to be. He checked his watch again. 8:44. He put the tablet down and picked it back up. And Renata, still looking at her phone, said, "You've read that agenda 4 times. He said, 3. She smiled without looking up. He almost smiled back. This is what controlled looks like from the inside. Not peace, not ease. Something more deliberate than both. A man building a structure around a space inside himself that he has decided will not be looked at, and tending that structure every day with the rigor of someone who understands that the alternative is worse." Nathan Hale understood. One, he had been tending it since November 4 years ago, since a gray morning not unlike this one, since a casket that was smaller than any casket should ever have to be, since his mother standing beside him with her hand on his arm saying, "This is the hardest day of my life," and Nathan believing her, completely without question. Because why would a mother lie about that? Why would anyone? The car stopped at Callaway Tower at 8:47. See, Nathan stepped out onto the sidewalk and looked up at the building for approximately 1 second. The survey of a man confirming that what he owns is still there, and then he walked through the glass doors into the lobby without breaking stride. The lobby of Callaway Tower smelled of the specific combination of polished concrete, climate-controlled air, and something faintly floral from the arrangement at the reception desk that was replaced every Monday. Nathan had never consciously noticed the smell. It was simply part of the building's voice. The way a person's home has a voice you do not hear until you have been away from it long enough to come back to it fresh. Nathan had not been away. He heard it the way you hear a sound you have stopped hearing. His shoes on the polished concrete made the sound they always made. The lobby staff greeted him the way they always greeted him. Raymond Chu, his chief of staff, he was at the far end of the lobby near the elevator bank, holding his phone to his ear, and he glanced up when Nathan entered. Raymond glanced up, and then he did something unusual. He looked back down at his phone before Nathan reached him, the deliberate redirect of a man who has decided, in the moment of eye contact, not to have a conversation he had been about to have. Nathan noted it the way he noted everything, filed it, kept moving. What Nathan did not see was Raymond's right-hand move, shaped briefly and without flourish, to the inside pocket of his jacket. A touch, a confirmation that something was there. Then his hand moved away. The elevator bank was on the left side of the lobby. 3 cars, the center one, with its doors already open and waiting. Nathan pressed the button for the 38th floor. Renata stepped in beside him. The doors began to close. Nathan turned to face the lobby, the habitual half-second survey he performed without thinking. The way a person checks a door is locked without remembering the checking. He saw the boy first. A small figure at the reception desk, maybe 4 years old, standing with both hands wrapped around a woman's fingers, looking around the lobby with the methodical, unhurried attention of a child cataloging a new environment. The toy car in his left hand, the striped shirt, the particular stillness behind his eyes, the way he looked at things without being in a hurry to look away. In the elevator doors were most of the way closed. Nathan's hand came up and stopped them. He did not think about doing it. His arm simply moved, the decision made somewhere below the level of thought, and the rubber edge of the doors pressed against his palm and held. He looked at the boy who had been looking at the elevator call buttons with interest, looked back. Across the lobby, the woman at the reception desk turned at some small sound, or some shift in the air, or the specific gravity of Nathan's attention landing on the space around her, and she looked up. Nathan had not said her name in 4 years, had not allowed himself to say it, had edited it out of his own thoughts with the persistent discipline of a man who knows that some words are doors and some doors should stay closed. He said it now, reflexively, before he could stop himself, and it came out the way words come out when they have been kept in a long time, rough at the edges, and carrying more than one thing. "Deborah!" Renata's head turned toward him, not toward Deborah, toward Nathan's face, because Nathan's face had done something she did not have a category for, and Renata Shaw had a category for most things. Deborah straightened slowly. She looked at him across the lobby with the expression of a woman who had been bracing for something for 4 years without knowing what shape it would take, and was now discovering the shape. The expression did not break into surprise. It was more like confirmation, an appointment she had always half expected to keep. She picked up Caleb's hand more firmly in hers and walked toward the elevator. Caleb walked beside her, looking around at the lobby, looking at the elevator, looking at the man holding the doors open. He did not look afraid. He looked interested, which was worse somehow, because fear Nathan would have known how to respond to. They stepped inside. One of the doors closed behind them, the 4 of them in a steel box the size of a large closet, and outside the building, the city continued its morning without any awareness that something had just gone irreversibly wrong. Nathan looked at Renata. She was looking at the floor panel, her jaw set, her phone in her hand, her thumb not moving over the screen the way it usually moved. He looked at Deborah. She was looking straight ahead at the closed doors, her chin slightly raised, her shoulders carrying the specific posture of a woman who has learned not to let her spine show what her chest is feeling. Caleb was beside her, their hands still connected, and he was watching the numbers above the door begin to climb with the focused satisfaction of a child who has just confirmed that buttons do what he expected them to do. Nathan said her name again, quieter this time, not a summons, something closer to a question. Deborah said, "Don't say my name like you're surprised to see me. Your building, your legal floor, I made an appointment. Her voice was level. There was something in the levelness that was harder to receive than anger would have been. Anger would have given him something to push against. This gave him nothing. Who is he? Nathan said, not a question. And the sentence had the structure of a question, but the weight of a man who had already felt the answer moved through him in the lobby and was asking now only because hearing it said aloud was the difference between suspecting and knowing. Deborah's hand tightened on Caleb's, so slightly that only someone watching her hand would have noticed, and Nathan was watching her hand. His name is Caleb, she said. He's 4, and you already know the rest. I don't, Nathan said. I don't know anything. The elevator reached floor 9, floor 10, floor 11. Renata said very quietly, Nathan. He did not answer her. He could not have explained in that moment why answering her felt impossible. Only that it did. Caleb let go of Deborah's hand. He sat down on the floor of the elevator, cross-legged, with the complete absence of self-consciousness that belongs exclusively to people under 5 years old. He set the toy car on the carpet in front of him and pushed it forward. The wheels made a soft rolling sound against the carpet, forward, then back. He found the section of carpet that gave the car the best momentum, and he stayed there focused, unhurried, indifferent to the altitude of the adult emotions around him. The sound of those wheels, forward and back. It was the only sound in the elevator for 3 floors. Nathan looked at the boy on the floor of his elevator. The angle of the jaw, and the particular weight of the gaze when it came up briefly to check the car's direction. The way he held his mouth when he was concentrating. Nathan had photographs of himself at 4 years old in a box in the back of his home office closet, behind the files he kept because he had to and never opened because he didn't want to. He had put those photographs there 4 years ago because looking at them had become the specific kind of unbearable that has no name. He knew what he looked like at 4, and he knew the jaw. He knew the eyes. He was looking at them now, sitting on the carpet of his elevator, rolling a toy car back and forth. Nathan's phone was in his hand. He did not remember taking it out. Floor 29. The elevator slowed, not because they had arrived anywhere, because the panel gave a small chime and a recorded voice, calm and professionally neutral, announced that an unregistered visitor access card had been detected above floor 28 and that the car would remain stationary until a building security officer performed a manual override. Estimated wait time, 12 to 20 minutes. Thank you for your patience. The elevator stopped. Nobody moved. Then Renata moved to the panel and pressed the intercom. A human voice confirmed what the recording had said, apologized, repeated the estimated wait, and disconnected. Renata pressed the button again, got the same information from the same apologetic voice. She let her hand drop. 12 to 20 minutes, steel walls, 4 people, one of them on the floor with a toy car. Forward, back, back. If this story's already pulling you in, do me a favor and hit the like button right now. And share it with one person who needs a story today. It helps more than you know. Keep listening. We are nowhere near the end. Caleb looked up from the car. He looked at Nathan directly, with the open, unself-conscious attention of a child who has not yet developed the social instinct that tells adults to look away when looking might reveal too much. He looked at Nathan the way Nathan imagined scientists looked at things they found genuinely surprising. Not rude, not shy, just looking. Then he held the toy car out toward Nathan, an offering. The flat open palm of a 4-year-old extending a small red car to a stranger, because the stranger had been looking at him for a while now, and this seemed to Caleb like the appropriate response. Nathan looked at the car, looked at the hand, looked at the crescent-shaped birthmark on the inside of the boy's left wrist, visible for just a moment as the sleeve rode up with the gesture, and then his eyes moved before his mind could fully register what he had seen, because what he had seen was not possible, and he was not ready. He did not take the car. Caleb held it there for another moment. Then he pulled it back, apparently without judgment, and went back to his carpet section and his rolling. Nathan looked at Deborah. What are you doing in this building? I told you, an appointment. She kept her eyes on the closed doors. The mediation office on 31. Birth record correction. There's a discrepancy in the paperwork that your legal floor filed during the divorce. What kind of discrepancy? She turned her head and looked at him then. And the look was not hostile, which he had expected, or cold, which he could have managed. It was tired. The particular tiredness of a woman who has carried something heavy alone for long enough that she has forgotten what it felt like to put it down. The kind that says his father's information is listed incorrectly, she said, because whoever filed it made a mistake, or didn't care enough not to. Nathan said, I never saw those records. Deborah's expression did not change. She simply looked at him for a moment in the silence between them, and the silence was doing the work. You waived your rights to them, she said finally. You signed the no-contact order, Nathan. I have a copy. My attorney has a copy. It has your signature on it. The elevator hummed around them. The ventilation in the ceiling made its constant low sound. Caleb's car went forward and back. Nathan said, I didn't sign anything. Now something changed in Deborah's face. Not visibly, not dramatically, something behind the eyes. A small recalibration, the expression of a person receiving information that does not fit the structure they have built to organize their life, and doing the fast, silent work of figuring out what it means if the information is true. She said, then someone did. Renata, who had been standing at the elevator panel with her phone in her hand and her face carefully arranged, said nothing. But her thumb, which had been perfectly still over her screen for the last several minutes, moved. One small motion, and then stopped. Nathan did not look at her yet. He was still looking at Deborah, and Deborah was looking at him, and between them the question was becoming larger than the elevator could comfortably hold. Someone signed. Someone had access to his identity, his legal signature, his official documents. Someone had arranged it. He began the list the way he began every problem, methodically. From the inside out, starting with the people closest to him and working outward. He did not finish the list aloud. He stopped at the third name. He stopped and did not move. Renata said, Nathan. Her voice had a quality he had not heard in 14 months, not quite controlled, something under the control working against it. He turned to look at her. Later, when he thought about this moment, he would not be able to say exactly what he saw on her face. And he would only be able to say that he saw it for a fraction of a second before she arranged herself, and that the fraction was enough. Because in that fraction, Renata Shaw looked like a woman who was waiting to see how much he knew. Not a woman encountering new information, a woman measuring existing information against what was being revealed. What? Nathan said. It was a single word with no inflection, and all of them in the elevator understood that it was not a casual question. Renata looked at the door. Caleb picked up his car. He stood up from the floor, brushing nothing off his knees, and he walked to the elevator door and crouched down and found the small gap at the base, between the rubber seal and the floor, a half-inch of space where the seal had worn unevenly. He pressed one eye to it with the focused curiosity of a 4-year-old who has discovered a small architectural secret and needs to understand it fully. And Nathan watched his son investigate the gap in the elevator door. He took his phone from his pocket and called Raymond. Raymond answered before the first ring finished. This told Nathan that Raymond had been holding the phone. The divorce documentation, Nathan said. The no-contact waiver. The filing on the birth records. Who processed it? Silence on the line, 4 seconds. The silence of a man deciding how to answer, rather than the silence of a man who doesn't know. Raymond said, I need to come upstairs. We're between floors, locked. I know, I can hear the announcement. I'm already at the elevator bank. Nathan looked at Caleb, still crouched at the base of the elevator door, one eye pressed to the gap, looking out at whatever was on the other side. A corridor, carpet, the ordinary world, locked out. He said, come up. He hung up. Deborah was watching him. Renata had not moved from the panel. The toy car was in Caleb's hand. The ventilation hummed. 3 minutes passed. Nathan did not fill them. He had learned over 20 years in rooms where the person who spoke first was the person who lost to let silence work. He let it work now, though the thing it was working on was not a negotiation and not a contract and not anything he had ever been in a room with before. Then a sound, low, deliberate, the sound of something being passed through a narrow space. 3 sheets of paper, folded once. Orange appeared through the gap at the base of the elevator door. From outside, sliding across the carpet in a slow, clean motion. Caleb looked at them. He looked up at Nathan. He picked them up with both hands and stood and held them out. The same open-palmed offering as the car, because this is what 4-year-olds do. They are the most efficient delivery system in any room. Nathan took the pages. He unfolded them. He read his mother's handwriting, her name at the top of the letter, her words. The careful, precise language of a woman making a business arrangement. The offer to Gerald Marsh, the framing of Deborah as a liability, the specific calculation of what Nathan would sacrifice if he knew the truth at the moment he had been most vulnerable, the week his father had the cardiac event, the week the board met without him to discuss contingency options, the week his entire empire was balanced on a wire, the offer, the timeline, the signature, Pamela Hale. So Nathan read the letter twice. Then he set it down on the elevator floor, carefully. The way you set something down when putting it down too fast might break something that has not yet finished breaking. Deborah said nothing. She had seen his face change while he read, and she understood what the change meant without needing the contents of the letter explained. Renata said nothing. Caleb looked at the pages on the floor, then at Nathan, then went back to his gap in the door. Nathan's mother had stood beside him at the memorial service with her hand on his arm. She had said it was the hardest day of her life. She had held his arm through all of it. The gray morning, the too small casket, the November cold that worked its way through his coat and stayed there for weeks afterward, the particular silence of a room full of people who do not know what to say to a man who has lost a child before he ever knew him. She had held his arm through all of it, and she had known. She had built it. She had built the grief, the way you build a wall, deliberately, brick by brick, because you have decided that the thing on the other side of it should not get through. Nathan looked up from the floor. He looked at Renata, and Renata Shaw, who was one of the sharpest people Nathan Hale had ever put in a room with himself, made one mistake. One small, involuntary mistake. She looked at the floor before he could ask his question. 1 second before. With a half second of a person who knows what the question is going to be and has been waiting for it and cannot, in the moment of its arrival, maintain the performance of not having been waiting. Nathan said, "Renata." She said, "Nathan." Her voice was steady. Her eyes came up. 1 second too late. He said, "You knew something." She opened her mouth. He said, "Don't tell me you didn't. I just watched you look at the floor before I finished the sentence." Caleb stood up from the door gap. He had finished his investigation of the corridor outside. He picked up his toy car and walked back to his section of carpet and sat down and began to roll it again. Forward, back. The sound of the wheels patient and consistent, the only thing in the elevator that was not holding its breath. Renata looked at Nathan. Something in her face was working through a decision that had been building for 8 months, in the elevator, in the locked doors, and the letter on the floor, and the boy on the carpet had finally made the decision for her. She said, 8 months ago, I found a photograph. Nathan did not move. She said, it came in an envelope, no return address, a photograph of a woman holding an infant. I recognized her from the photo you keep in your desk. Her voice was steady and she was going to keep it steady because Renata Shaw did not collapse in front of people, and she was not going to start. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself there was an explanation. I put it away. Nathan said, "You put it away." I destroyed it. The elevator hummed. Forward, back. 8 months, Nathan said. She said, "Yes." He said nothing else. He did not need to. The nothing said all of it. The full weight of 8 months, 240 days. Every morning he had woken up in the life he had rebuilt over his grief. The life he had chosen Renata to be part of. Every one of those mornings she had known there was a question underneath it all and had chosen, deliberately, not to ask it. Nathan picked the letter up from the floor. He folded it once. He put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at Caleb. Caleb held the car out again. Same open palm, same waiting. The same unhurried, unanxious patience of a boy who had learned, somewhere in 4 years of mornings with one parent, that waiting was not the same as losing. Nathan stared at the cars in his son's outstretched hand. He did not take it yet, because he knew that taking it would mean something. He could feel the weight of the taking before it happened. The way you feel the weight of a door before you open it, the awareness that the air on the other side is different from the air where you are standing, and that once you step through, where you were standing will be somewhere you cannot go back to. The car waited. Caleb waited. The elevator hummed. And from outside the doors, from somewhere above them in the shaft, Raymond's voice came through the gap at the base of the door, low and careful. He said, "Nathan, there's something else in the letter you need to see. A second name. I didn't want to put it through with the pages." Nathan looked at the gap, then at Renata, then at Deborah. Deborah was watching him with the expression of a woman standing at the edge of something large, waiting to find out if it holds. Nathan said, "Hi, what's second name?" Raymond did not answer immediately. Outside the elevator, somewhere in the building system, something shifted. The override mechanism engaged. The recorded voice thanked them for their patience. The elevator groaned once, low and mechanical, and then the doors began, slowly, to open. And standing in the corridor on floor 29, 12 feet from the elevator, arms crossed, her expression the one she wore to every negotiation she had ever won, was Pamela Hale. She was looking at Deborah the way she had always looked at Deborah, like a variable she had already accounted for, like something she had already handled. She had not yet seen Nathan's face. The ventilation system in Callaway Tower runs constantly. You never notice it when the building is full of people and movement and the particular noise of a place where serious things are being decided. But in a corridor on floor 29, in the 30 seconds after an elevator opens and nobody speaks, do you notice it? A low, steady hum, not loud enough to be a sound exactly. More a presence. The building breathing, indifferent to the humans, stopped inside it like figures in a photograph that has not yet been taken. That is where we are. That is what the air feels like. The doors are open. The corridor is empty except for one woman who made herself the architect of another person's grief and is now standing 12 feet away from everything she built, looking at it hold together or fall apart, on it, and she does not yet know which it is going to be. Nathan knew. He had known from the moment the doors started moving, from the low mechanical groan of the override engaging, from the specific quality of Raymond stepping back from the gap in the door, back and away, the instinctive retreat of a man making room for something larger than himself. Nathan had felt it before he saw it, the way you feel a change in a room before you can name what changed. A shift in the pressure of the air, of a different quality of stillness. He had positioned himself before the doors were fully open. Not consciously, not with strategy. His body had simply done it, moved between Caleb and whatever was outside, the way certain things move before the mind can organize the instruction. By the time the corridor was visible, Nathan Hale was standing at the front of the elevator with his son directly behind him and his mother 12 feet ahead of him, and nothing between them but the gap and 4 years of constructed silence. Pamela Hale was dressed for the board meeting she had expected to attend this morning. Charcoal wool, her hair set, the particular posture of a woman who had spent 6 decades in rooms where posture was a form of argument. She looked at Deborah first. The assessment was brief and complete, with the glance of someone confirming that a managed situation is still managed. Then she looked at Nathan. She saw his face. Whatever she had prepared to say, she did not say it. Nathan walked out of the elevator. He did not look back. He knew Deborah would follow, knew she would bring Caleb, knew that Caleb would take his toy car and his leaf and his patient, unhurried attention and carry them out into the corridor without complaint. Because Caleb moved through the world without complaint. He had, apparently, learned that early. Nathan stopped 6 feet from his mother. He took the letter from his jacket pocket. He did not unfold it. He did not hold it up or present it or make any gesture that suggested he needed it as a prop. He simply held it at his side, the way you hold something you already know the contents of, the way you hold evidence when the evidence is not the point anymore. The point was something else now. The point was her face, and what was or was not moving across it as she understood what he was holding. She said, "Raymond had no right to share that." Nathan said, "He had every right." She said, "That letter is private correspondence between myself and a private individual, and it has no bearing on." Nathan said, "Stop." She stopped. The corridor was quiet except for the ventilation and the faint sound of Caleb's sneaker on the carpet behind Nathan. A small shuffling adjustment. Such the boy finding a comfortable stance. Nathan did not turn around. He held his mother's gaze and he did not give her anything to work with. She tried a different angle. She was good at different angles. She had been doing it his whole life, moving around obstacles the way water moves, finding the path of least resistance without ever appearing to redirect. She said, "Whatever she told you about the circumstances, Nathan, and there are things you don't understand about what was happening at the company that year. What the board was saying. What would have happened to everything your father built if you held a memorial service," Nathan said. She stopped. "There was a casket," he said. His voice had not risen. It was, if anything, quieter than it had been. The kind of quiet that happens when a person has gone past the place where volume is useful. "I stood next to you. You had your hand on my arm. Yet you told me it was the hardest day of your life." The corridor held the words. Pamela Hale opened her mouth. Nathan watched her find the architecture of her response, watched her locate the framing that would make what she had done into something navigable, something justifiable, something she could present as a version of love. He had watched her do this his whole life. The reframe, the repositioning, the gentle, insistent pressure of a woman who had never once in 64 years been willing to stand in the open space of an undefended thing she had done. She could not do it this time. The casket was too specific. The mourning was too specific. The hand on his arm was too specific. There was no angle that bent around those details without breaking. She said, "Ross?" and then stopped because that was not his name. And the slip, the tiny involuntary error of a mind under pressure, sat in the corridor between them like something she had dropped. Nathan said, "His name is Caleb." Pamela looked past Nathan's shoulder. For the first time, she looked at the boy directly, not the assessment she had given him in the lobby, not the strategic measurement of a threat or a variable, but looked at him, the way you look at something real when you have been managing your perception of it for so long that reality arrives like a correction. Caleb was looking back at her, and his toy car in one hand, the leaf in the other. Looking at this woman who was looking at him with an expression he did not have a category for, being unequipped with the adult vocabulary for what guilt looks like when it is trying not to be visible and failing. He said, "Hi." One word, offered the same way he had offered the car, openly, without agenda. Pamela did not answer him. Nathan turned slightly, not leaving his position, but turning enough to see his son, and Caleb looked up at him, and Nathan looked back, and something passed between them that did not need language, could not have been improved by language. The specific wordless communication of two people who have just in the last hour begun to understand that they belong to each other. Raymond stepped forward from the wall where he had been standing. He had the expression of a man who had made a decision about himself that morning and intended to honor it. He said, "I've already contacted the legal team. The letter and the supporting documentation have been forwarded. The board will need to be notified, and the birth and death records will need a formal correction process. That process started 40 minutes ago." He looked at Pamela when he said it, not with hostility, with the clarity of a man who was done organizing his loyalty around a structure that had been rotten at the center. He said, "I should have asked about those records 4 years ago. There were things that didn't sit right, and I let them sit. That's on me." He looked at Nathan. "I'm sorry." Nathan said, "Stay." Raymond nodded. He was not going anywhere. Pamela said, "You're making a decision in an emotional moment that will have consequences for the rest of your professional life. The board, the contracts, the public positioning of the company. You cannot simply—" Nathan said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." She said, You're going to lose everything your father built." He said, "My father also built a family. You only saved one of those things." This landed. He watched it land, not with satisfaction, with something sadder and more final than satisfaction, the feeling of a truth arriving too late to be useful for anything except the record. Pamela looked at her son, the full weight of the look, unfiltered, perhaps the first unfiltered thing she had offered him in this conversation. And whatever she saw in Nathan's face confirmed for her what the casket and the letter in Caleb's open hello had been building toward. She had lost, not the argument, something larger. She had lost the version of Nathan that had needed her enough to let her run his life, and that version was not coming back. She said very quietly, "I did what I thought was necessary." Nathan said, "I know you did." And then he said nothing else. He did not tell her to leave. He did not ask Raymond to escort her out. He simply turned away, back toward Deborah and Caleb, the deliberate turning of a man concluding a conversation without the punctuation of a closing line. Because some conversations do not deserve closing lines. They deserve the back of a person walking toward something that matters more. Pamela stood in the corridor for a moment. Then she walked to the elevator and pressed the call button and waited. Soon, and when the doors opened, she stepped inside and the doors closed, and she was gone. And nobody watched her go except Raymond, who stood at the end of the corridor with his phone in one hand and the copy of the letter in the other, and a look on his face like a man taking a breath he had been postponing for 11 years. Renata had not moved from the elevator doorway. She was watching Nathan with Caleb and Deborah in the corridor, and her expression had gone past the careful management she had maintained all morning into something more honest and more costly. She looked like a woman arriving, finally, at a truth about herself that she had been circling for 8 months. Not a comfortable arrival, the kind that doesn't feel like an arrival at all from the inside, the kind that feels like a door closing. Nathan turned to her. She spoke before he could. She said, "I am not going to make you say it." He looked at her. And she said, "I knew something was wrong. I decided not to know it. I made that decision over and over for 8 months, and every time I made it, I told myself I was being reasonable. I was being careful. I was protecting something." She paused. "I was protecting myself," Nathan said. "Renata." She shook her head. Once. Small. The gesture of a woman who has decided to finish a thing she started. She said, "I don't want to be the person who did that. I'm not sure I knew that until today, but I know it now." She looked at Caleb. He was looking at her with his usual frank attention, the leaf in his hand, the car in the other, patient as furniture. She said to Caleb, "You're going to be okay." She said it with a directness that was not performing warmth. It was simply true, and she wanted it said. Caleb considered her. He said, "I know." 4 years old. Absolute certainty. Renata almost smiled. She looked at Nathan one last time. He looked back. When 14 months of a life built together, functional and warm and real in its way, and both of them understanding, in the specific silence of people who know each other well, that they had never been building toward the same thing, and that this was nobody's fault, and that the truth of it was sad in the quiet way that most real sadnesses are, without drama, without someone to be angry at. Just the fact of two people who were not the right fit for what each of them actually needed. How she walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened. She turned around to face the corridor. One more moment, and Nathan was already looking at Caleb, and Caleb was already looking at the decorative plant against the wall. And Renata's face did something private that she was allowed to do privately. The doors closed. Nathan stood in the corridor of the 29th floor of the building he had built over his grief with his son and his son's mother and his chief of staff. And the ventilation hummed, and Caleb crouched down beside the small potted plant near the wall and pulled off one leaf and held it up to the corridor light to look at it from underneath. Nathan watched him do this. The thin light of the corridor coming through the leaf, the boy's face tipped upward, concentrated, investigating the leaf's private architecture with the seriousness of someone for whom this information genuinely matters. He was not performing curiosity. He was curious. He had been curious all morning, about everything. The lobby, the elevator buttons, the door gap, the carpet's resistance to the car's wheels, and now this leaf. And he would be curious about the next thing and the next. Because this was who he was, and nobody had interrupted it. And he had spent 4 years becoming himself without an audience. And he was, Nathan understood in a slow, spreading recognition that moved from his chest outward, just fine. He was just fine. Nathan crouched down. He did it without thinking. The way he had reached out to hold the elevator doors in the lobby, below the level of instruction, the body deciding before the mind could organize the decision. He was at Caleb's level. Caleb glanced at him, confirmed he was there, looked back at the leaf. Nathan said, "Good find." Caleb assessed this, nodded, the nod of a person whose finding has been properly recognized. Then he held the leaf out toward Nathan. Nathan took it, and he held it up to the light the same way Caleb had, tilting it, looking at the structure of it, the thin veins running outward from the center stem, the light coming through in different densities. He looked at it for a real moment, not a performed moment. Then he looked at his son. Caleb's left sleeve had ridden up during his investigations of the corridor. The inside of his wrist was visible, pale and small. The crescent-shaped mark sitting on the skin like something placed there with intention. Dark, precise. The exact shape and position Nathan had looked at on his own wrist since childhood, since the first time he asked his mother what it was, and she said some people are just born with marks and left it at that. Nathan's throat closed. He did not speak. He pushed his own left sleeve back, slowly, and he held his wrist next to his son's. The two marks, side by side, the same shape. The same position on the same wrist. One on a grown man's arm, and one on the arm of the child that man had mourned for 4 years in a grief that had been handed to him, like a fact. Caleb looked at the two wrists. He looked at Nathan's mark. He looked at his own. He looked at Nathan's face. He said, "We match." The two words sat in the corridor and did not echo, because the corridor was carpeted and quiet. But they sat in Nathan's chest and they did not leave. He felt his breath go. Not a sob. Not a sound, just the breath, leaving him completely, a slow, total exhale. The physical release of a man putting down something he has been carrying since November 4 years ago, in gray rain with his hands in his coat pockets, thinking this is the thing that will never stop hurting. It stopped. He pulled his son toward him, carefully asking in the motion rather than words, and Caleb leaned forward without hesitation. Because Caleb had been assessing Nathan Hale all morning with his scientist's patience and had arrived at his conclusion, and his conclusion was yes. And so he leaned forward and put his chin on Nathan's shoulder, and his small arms came up and his fingers held on, and he was warm the way children are warm, completely, radiantly, the warmth of a small body that has not yet learned to hold any of itself back. Nathan held his son. The leaf was still in Caleb's fist, pressed against Nathan's back. Deborah made a sound she had not planned to make. It came from somewhere she had been keeping sealed for a long time, and it was not dramatic, it was small. The sound of something compressed for years returning to its original size, in a hallway on a Tuesday morning, in a building she had come to for a records correction, and found instead the thing she had stopped letting herself want. She put her hand over her mouth. She did not move toward them. She stood and she watched her son with his father for the first time, and she let herself feel the full weight of it, the beauty of it, and the cost of it, and the years of it, all of it at once. Raymond looked at the floor. He had the expression of a man who was not going to remember this moment as the one where his boss found his son. He was going to remember it as the moment he understood what he had been working for without knowing it, and what he had failed to protect, why and what it meant that the protecting was beginning now regardless. After a time, Caleb pulled back slightly. He looked at Nathan's face with the evaluating attention he gave everything. He said, "What's your name?" Deborah made another sound, smaller than the first. The specific grief of learning that absence has a shape you did not expect. Her son did not know his father's name. 4 years old and meeting the man for the first time in a locked elevator in a carpeted corridor. And the man was real now, was here now, but 4 years of mornings had already happened without a name to put to the face. Nathan said, "Nathan." Caleb tried it. "Nathan," testing the shape of it in his mouth, the way children try new words. He said it again, slightly differently, locating the version that felt right. Then he nodded. Apparently it fit. He held the leaf out between them again. Nathan took it. He turned it once in his fingers. Then he put it in his shirt pocket, the leaf standing up slightly from the fabric, and Caleb watched this happen with the expression of a boy whose contribution has been handled correctly. They took the elevator down, all three of them in the car this time, going to the lobby, nobody speaking for the first several floors because there was too much to say for an elevator, and they both understood that. The car made its ordinary sounds, the same sounds it had made all morning, indifferent and continuous. Floor 22, floor 17, floor 11. And at floor 8, Nathan looked at the leaf in his shirt pocket. He thought about his mother in a different elevator, going down, the doors closing on her face, the specific expression she had not been able to control when she understood that the reframe was not going to work this time. He thought about what she had said. I did what I thought was necessary, and the terrible honesty of it. The fact that she had thought that, had held that thought for 4 years. He had organized her self-understanding around it the way you organize furniture around a room's worst feature, by arrangement, by careful placement, by never standing in the spot from which it is fully visible. He thought about Raymond upstairs with the letter, and the second name, the name Raymond had not slid under the door with the pages, and he thought, I will deal with that. Not today. Today was already something he did not have language for yet. And adding another layer to it before he had processed the layers he had would be the kind of thing the old Nathan would have done. The Nathan who believed that handling everything immediately was the same as handling it well. He was beginning to think those were different things. The lobby. They walked out through the corridor, past the reception desk, past the polished concrete floor and the floral arrangement that was replaced every Monday, and the sound of his shoes that he had never consciously noticed and now noticed completely. Because everything in this building sounded different when you were not moving through it alone. Through the glass doors, out into the city. The light outside was the particular quality of mid-morning. Past the thin early uncertainty of it, arrived at something more committed. It fell on Caleb's face as the boy stopped on the sidewalk and turned his face up toward it, eyes half closed, the instinctive, unrehearsed response of a child walking out of a building and finding the sun. Not performed, not for anyone. Just a boy in the light in the simple fact of being outside. Nathan stood on the sidewalk of a city that had continued its Tuesday without interrupting itself for any of what had happened in the building behind him. And he looked at his son, look at the light. Deborah stood beside him, not close enough to be a statement, close enough to be real. She said, I have 4 years of things to say to you. He said, I have 4 years of things I should have said. They did not look at each other when they said it. They were both looking at Caleb, who had finished with the light and had moved on to examining the seam in the sidewalk with his sneaker toe, because the sidewalk had an interesting seam and he wanted to understand it. Nathan said, I'm going to fix the records. Every document with my name on it that says something I didn't say. Every piece of paper that was used to build something that shouldn't have been built. I'll fix it. Deborah said, I know you will. Not because she had forgiven him. Not because the 4 years had been accounted for or resolved or wrapped in any kind of neatness. But because she had looked at his face in that elevator when he read the letter, and she knew what she had seen. And what she had seen was a man arriving at the truth without flinching from it. She had not expected that. She had been prepared for defense, for legal maneuvering, for the institutional machinery of a wealthy man protecting his position. She had not been prepared for a man who set the letter down carefully on an elevator floor and did not speak for 3 full minutes, and then looked at her like someone returning from a place he had been trapped in. She had been prepared for a lot of things in 4 years. She had not been prepared for him to be here. Caleb looked up from the seam. He looked at Nathan, who was standing beside his mother on the sidewalk in the light. He walked over to Nathan and without any preface or announcement took Nathan's hand. Not the offering this time. Not the open palm with the car or the leaf. Just his hand finding Nathan's, folding around 2 of Nathan's fingers, the way small hands hold large hands. The pragmatic, confident grip of a child who has decided something and is acting on it. Nathan looked down at his son's hand in his. He did not speak. He did not need to. Deborah looked at them, her son's hand in his father's hand, the 2 of them standing on a Tuesday sidewalk with the city moving around them, and she felt something she had not felt in 4 years. Not the version of it that is relief exactly, but the precursor to it. In the moment just before you let yourself believe that something is going to be all right, when you can feel the belief forming and you don't stop it. She said quietly, what do we do now? Nathan said, we start. Not a speech, not a promise. 2 words with the specific plainness of a man who has learned this morning that the elaborate architecture of managed living is no substitute for the plain thing, and who intends from this point forward to do the plain thing whenever possible. Now, he did not let go of Caleb's hand. They began to walk. In the lobby of Callaway Tower, Raymond Chu stood alone near the elevator bank with his phone in one hand and the letter in the other. The lobby had returned to its ordinary Tuesday. The reception staff were doing their ordinary work. The floral arrangement stood in its place. People moved through with their badges and their agendas and their 8:47 arrivals, indifferent to what had happened in the building above them. Raymond read the letter for the third time. He had read it quickly in his office when it arrived from the legal department. He had read it again outside the elevator on the 29th floor, deciding whether to slide it through. Both times he had focused on Pamela's name, on the offer to Gerald Marsh, on the date and the signature and the specific wording of the arrangement. Both times he had moved through the letter's body efficiently, extracting the essential information. The way he extracted essential information from everything. He read it slowly now. Near the end of the third page, in the third paragraph from the bottom, 4 lines he had not fully registered before. Pamela's handwriting, her precise, controlled cursive. The other arrangement was handled separately, she had written. I prefer not to put both names in the same document. The other party was more reluctant than I anticipated, but accepted the terms after the second conversation. Someone Nathan trusts completely. I will say only that. This letter should contain nothing further. Raymond read it again. The other party. Someone Nathan trusts completely. He looked at the elevator doors. He looked at the lobby entrance, where through the glass he could see Nathan and Deborah and Caleb on the sidewalk. The small figure of the boy between the 2 adults, all 3 of them beginning to walk in the same direction. Raymond looked at his phone. He looked at the letter. The lobby moved around him, ordinary, continuous. Tuesday. He put the letter in his pocket and took the elevator up. He had phone calls to make, and documentation to organize, and a board to notify, and the beginning of a very long process of dismantling a structure that had been in place for 4 years. He had work to do. He would tell Nathan about the third paragraph. Not today. Nathan had enough for today, but there was another name somewhere in the architecture of what had been built. Someone who had been reluctant and then accepted. Someone Nathan trusted completely. Someone who was still, as of this Tuesday morning, inside the life Nathan was going to rebuild. The elevator doors closed. The lobby continued. Outside on the sidewalk, a boy held his father's hand and looked at the seams in the world like someone who intends to understand every one of them. If this story stayed with you today, if you felt what Nathan felt in that elevator, if you held your breath when Caleb held out that car, then this story did what it was made to do. Like it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that truth, however late it arrives, is worth the arrival. Subscribe to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis. Every story on this channel is about what people choose when the choice finally becomes impossible to avoid. We will see you in the next one.